Welcome to Robinson Hall Experts Talk. My name is Laura Saunders, Marketing and PR Manager at Robinson Hall. Today is the 11th of November and I have Abel Bunu and Tristan Peck with me. We are going to be talking about permission in principle. Abel Bunu is Principal Planner. He joined Robinson Hall over 7 years ago, having previously worked for 13 years for local councils, so is aware of how the local planning authorities work and in particular the process in which planning applications are determined. Tristan Peck is Planning and Development Surveyor. Tristan joined Robinson Hall earlier this year. He has worked previously in the UK housing building industry for over 2 years as a land manager, which included a number of land acquisitions across the home counties. Prior to this, he worked for 7 years at Bledsoes, working with clients to enhance their portfolio. Welcome, Tristan and Abel.
Hello, thank you.
So first things first, what is permission in principle?
Okay, I'll kickstart the conversation. We would not have done justice if we go straight into defining what permission in principle is without giving you a broad overview of where it fits within the whole planning system. There are several types of applications that one can submit to a council.
Okay.
I'll just quickly go through those types of applications and I'll show you where permission in principle fits in.
Perfect.
The first one, which is probably the most common of them all, is a full planning application whereby an applicant provides all the details for the council to consider. And then below that, there is what is called an outline application, which seeks to establish the principle of the development. With outline applications, you can reserve all matters for further consideration in a follow-up reserved matters application.
Okay.
So the whole idea is to establish the principle of the development before you commit a lot of resources into the initial planning process.
Yeah.
Then in 2017, now I'm going to introduce the concept of permission in principle. That's when the government introduced permission in principle, simplify the planning process. Also, I could mention the other two types of applications. There's a prior approval. We're not going to be discussing that. There is a certificate of lawfulness application. But in our day-to-day business, as we look at advising our clients to make the best use of the planning system, we can pick and choose
which options is best.
Identify for the client and advise which one is best given their circumstances.
Yeah.
I think, as Abel's outlined, permission in principle sits alongside various other planning avenues which you can explore as a landowner. And it has its sort of place. What I think Abel and I have found over the last few years is PIPs, as they're also known as, enable landowners to establish from a local planning authority whether in principle development, predominantly residential-led development on this site is acceptable without actually incurring great cost, which I think is probably the most important point to take out of today. With the full planning application or even an outline application, you're having to submit various reports, whereas with a PIP, you really only need a plan, a form, and an optional planning statement, which we would advise clients to do. However, you don't actually need to do it. So the cost associated with a PIP can be significantly less than most
So
forms.
why doesn't everyone that's got land that they're looking to develop for residential purposes go down the PIP route?
It's a very interesting question and one that is pertinent because as we discuss with our clients, it's surprising how much PIP is not known out there. So that is one of our roles, to explain the pros and cons of PIP. It's a question of selling an idea and first of all appreciating the individual circumstances of our clients. So we then advise them to go the PIP route. So just to go a little bit further into explaining what Tristan has just been talking about.
Yeah.
As PIP sits alongside all these other various types of application routes, you are only expected to submit a location plan or a site plan if you want to, but it's not desperately necessary that you submit a site plan. And also Tristan mentioned that a planning statement is optional. It's not one of those sort of validation requirements. So your application would not be considered invalid.
Right, if you don't.
If you didn't submit a planning statement.
Yeah.
But we will strongly recommend that a PIP application is supported by a planning statement, because that's when we get the opportunity to build our case and justify why we think in principle the development is acceptable. And also Tristan mentioned that with PIP, we are looking at a housing-led development. If I could explain a little bit what that means.
Yeah.
It means that principally, the whole idea is to deliver houses, as many houses as possible on the site, up to a maximum of 9 units. Within that proposal, you could introduce some commercial development, or not necessarily commercial. It could be, say, a community facility.
It's like a village hall or something like that.
But the lead development should be residential.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I may need to point out, which is a follow-up to the question that you raised, that why is it that lots of people do not go the PIP route. So there is, I think, a bit of confusion out there in terms of what you can actually get out of a PIP.
Yeah.
Some people, I believe, they think a PIP is a glorified pre-application advice. But I would want to demystify that view, because with pre-application advice, you get an officer's opinion, which is caveated by the words, this is an officer's personal view, which is not binding on the council.
Yeah.
So for landowners whose aim is to unlock the value of their land, that doesn't quite do the job.
Okay.
Because you wouldn't be able to convince a prospective buyer. So just above a pre-application advice, you've got a permission in principle, which is now binding.
Okay.
But because it's not supported by detailed surveys, it's not supported by a scheme to show or to indicate how the development is going to pan out. Although, of course, I must say it is optional also to submit an indicative scheme.
Yeah. Do you find, just to stop you there, that the more information you provide with your PIPs, the higher the chance of success?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Because the whole idea is to test the principle of the development.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily need to provide a detailed scheme in order for an officer to agree that this is okay in principle.
Yeah.
Because when you are providing details, we are talking of the design, how it's going to look. So that would be sort of jumping the gun. If you go to the details of the design without first of all establishing the principle, in any event, I would say that defeats the purpose
Of what it's about.
of a PIP.
Yeah.
Because one of the selling points when talking about PIP is that you avoid investing lots of resources, cash, and everything else that goes into packaging a planning application. So you need to first of all be satisfied that the principle is acceptable in the first place.
I think, so just to jump in, I think that's quite an important point because, for example, on a client's parcel of land that I'm dealing with at the moment in Huntingdonshire, Cambridgeshire, the clients had difficulties in the past with planning on this particular parcel of land and parked it for a number of years. We recommended to go down the PIP route where we could incur minimum cost whilst actually again sort of going at the council with regards to whether they would accept principle of development on the site.
Yeah.
Huntingdonshire don't have a 5-year land supply at the moment. And that was one of the arguments which we included in the planning statement, which is why planning statements are important to sit alongside your form and plan. Huntingdonshire accepted that they don't have a land supply. And that parcel of land which the client had been trying to push for 5 to 10 years now has a PIP approval.
Fantastic.
So from that, having incurred not an awful lot of cost, we can now move on to the next stage, which is where you do incur the cost. And actually, in this particular case, we've have a developer who's now taking it on as subject to planning deal.
Great.
So yeah, I think that's a classic case of where a PIP can really come in handy.
Yeah.
Particularly with a client that's nervous about incurring further cost having been unsuccessful in the past.
Yeah, spending a lot of money just for it to basically go down the drain.
Yeah.
The next stage from a PIP, you could be wondering what it is.
Yeah.
I would draw parallels with the outline application process, where in an outline application process, go to the reserved matters stage, which is the consideration of the detailed design and any other outstanding surveys or reports are required at that stage. With PIP, the next stage is called the technical details consent stage. That's when, after having satisfied yourself that the principle is acceptable, you can now prepare a whole set of detailed drawings.
Would that be the start of almost like a full planning application then?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is in fact a full planning application, but which then takes into account the permission in principle that has been granted.
Already.
So at the technical details consent stage, the council is not going to reopen the chapter on the principle of the development because that has already been approved and confirmed.
Okay.
Yes.
How long does a PIP usually take?
The first stage should take 5 weeks.
Okay.
From validation. It's just something just to say quickly that we haven't covered it off. Abel did mention earlier that PIPs can cover up to 9 dwellings, which is called a small scale development. But there's also other categories that the pit needs to sort of meet, or criteria which it needs to meet, which is also that you can't create more than 1,000 meters squared of floor space as part of any application, and the application area can't be greater than 1 hectare.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. In other words, there are certain exclusions to PIP. Broadly, in terms of the scale, if it is considered a major application, then it's automatically outside the remit of PIP.
So you wouldn't be able to go down that road.
Yeah, like he is explained, it has to be a small scale development below a major application. And there are other exclusions. Possibly we can't go into detail about all the other exclusions. Any prospective applicant may want to contact us for
further advice.
For further advice, because there are certain intricacies that one needs to be aware of, which is what we deal with on a day-to-day
basis. Yeah, it sounds like it's quite complex. It's obviously been designed to make it slightly easier and cheaper for people to decipher whether planning is possible for them. But then, by the sounds of it, there's lots of loopholes to go through.
Yes, I would say, like everything else in planning, what might look very innocuous can end up being very difficult, because I can assure you the planning system is not very easy to navigate. I know there's lots of stuff that you can get on the internet.
Yeah.
But the internet is not specific to situations that we encounter with our clients. Every situation is different.
Yeah.
And every council is different. Tristan has mentioned his example in Huntingdonshire, where the council admitted that they didn't have a 5-year land supply of housing. That's not the only thing that we consider when we package our planning statement. There are lots of other things that we need to assess. And also, talking about the individual circumstances of each of our clients, before we recommend whether PIP is the best route for them, we sit down with our clients and assess what the end game is. For some clients, the end game is to just unlock the value of the land and then sell it on with permission in principle.
Yeah.
Whereas with some of our clients, they actually want to develop this site on their own. So we got to factor in lots of things before we recommend what the best route for the client is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And talking of complexities, Abel actually dealt with this one, but I've sort of picked it up because it's now become a potential disposal. But Abel, you dealt with a site again in Huntingdonshire, which was an initial pit, which was refused because the case officer determined that the pit would impact on the nearby listed building.
Right.
However, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Abel, but that shouldn't be a reason for refusal as part of a pit, because until you know the design of the scheme, how it's going to be laid out, the scale,
all the details,
the materials, etc., you don't actually know how it will impact on that nearby listed building. So Abel was successful in appealing that decision.
Okay.
And subsequently now the client has asked us to dispose of it.
Okay.
So I think there's an argument that the case officers actually in some cases interpret planning legislation incorrectly.
It's quite good to know that you can actually appeal a PIP, because that's, because of the nature of it, you'd think, well, it's if the case officer says no, then that's it. Because it's meant to be a simple way of knowing whether planning is possible without incurring lots of costs. So it's good that you can actually go back on the decision that you get if it's not a good one, and say, well, actually, hang about, what about this and what about that? So that's a really good example.
Yeah. So just to go back on the point that you raised, or the question that you posed about why a lot of people do not go the PIP route. So you can see the misconceptions about PIP are not only restricted to our clients, but even officers can at times get it wrong in terms of where PIP starts and ends. Because with PIP, the council is only supposed to be looking at three things: the location of the development, whether it's acceptable in planning terms or not, and the land use, whether the land use that you are proposing is acceptable. We've already touched on the fact that it should be housing led, with a bit of other non-residential proposals. And the third thing that the council needs to look at is the amount of the development that is being proposed.
You've touched on a couple of success stories, both actually in Huntingdonshire. Have you got any others, just to give our listeners kind of an idea as to when PIP is ultimately worth pursuing?
Yes, we want to talk about one that is recently been approved by Buckinghamshire. Thankfully, this one didn't have to go to appeal. So I did put forward an argument to the council and justified why I thought the development should be acceptable outside the settlement envelope, where development would not normally be approved, and in the open countryside, with all sorts of negatives on the scale. And the officer agreed that, yes, on balance, the principle of the development would be acceptable.
Okay.
And there are lots of things that we put into the planning statement to bolster our case, which was quite persuasive. And the council approved PIP. And I'm glad to say the site has now been sold to a prospective developer.
Fantastic.
And we got a review. You did pick on the positive review that we got from the client.
Yes.
Yeah. They were so pleased about the outcome, because initially they were going to just sell off the land without exploring what else they could do and what uplift in value they could get. So they are very pleased that they talked to us, and we gave them the correct advice to go the PIP route.
You've mentioned a couple of times about uplifting value and unlocking the value. Is there kind of a rough guide as to, having some kind of planning agreement on your land before you sell it? Is there like a percentage that normally the land would increase by in value with having planning on it, or permission in principle?
No, there isn't a certain value. Each case is different.
Yeah.
And depending on the location of the site, there are different signals in different markets. For instance, you pick a site in Huntingdonshire, you pick a site in Buckinghamshire, you pick a site in Central Bedfordshire. Those are different market scenarios.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there isn't any particular percentage that we say your site is going to get an uplift of X percent. But it also follows after getting PIP that evaluation exercise would in most cases be necessary to try and drill down into some kind of estimated figures. But remember, at that stage, we haven't got the details of the scheme, but we've got a rough idea of how many units one can achieve on that side.
Okay.
So that's where the complexity actually arises in saying you are going to get an X percentage of uplift in value. Maybe Tristan, you can
So I think just going back one step, so in terms of Abel's open countryside pit, which he was successful at, I think that is just a classic example of a client that probably wouldn't have spent 10, 20, 30,000 on a planning application, whether that be outline or full, that spent probably 10-20% of what they could have spent on a pit, and suddenly they've got a site which is worth a lot of money. In terms of sort of values and what land can jump from with the benefit of a PIP or permission, planning permission. No, I mean, there's no
one size fits all.
No, however, I mean, you've got to take into account pound per square foot in the area. As Abel said, Huntingdonshire, Cambridgeshire might be different from Buckinghamshire, which might be different from Peterborough, for example. Build costs are generally pretty high right now. And that's and then obviously there's no impact. There's a low confidence in the market at the moment from developers with regard to selling houses and cost of borrowing and things like that.
It's very market driven.
The market is quite tricky. There is no rule of thumb when it comes to the uplift in value. However, going back to my case study, I mean, for my single dwelling pit in Huntingdonshire, we've probably turned a site that's worth 50 grand into a site that's worth 5 times that. Just from a PIP application which cost a client in the order of 3-4 grand.
There's a lot to it. As both Tristan and Abel have said, we've got years of experience. We know the market. We know what's worked, what hasn't. So our expertise is crucial, really, when it comes to giving you a kind of the options and which one we would suggest would work best in your situation. Thank you ever so much, Tristan and Abel, for today. Thank you for listening. I have launched a variety of podcasts over recent months, years. Have a listen to them. There are a couple of planning ones, one on permitted development, which might be interested in, and we'll obviously be launching many more in the future. So hopefully you'll join us again next time. Many thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Our podcasts are for informational purposes only and are based on the information available at the date of the recording. Listeners are responsible for how they interpret and use the information, and Robinson Hall LLP will not be responsible for any losses, damages or liabilities that may arise from a listener relying on the information given. Listeners should take advice from an appropriate professional which is tailored to their specific needs.